And so thanks for joining us for our AMP bootcamp session. We're looking at mentor and mentee matching and other secrets of success. And so thanks very much to everyone for joining us. We're in good hands today with Bruce, Randall, and Bao Ho from CRIEC, and of course, ever-present support and wisdom from Doug Piquette. And so I'll turn it over to you guys to get going. Do you want me to give you co-host so you can share slides, or?
I think I'm able to do so already. It looks like I'm able to get it. So.
Okay.
Great. So I'll just do a quick intro. We love being on these boot camp calls. There's just so much learning happening. Doug and Cheryl and I were very fortunate. On Tuesday, we presented at the PNT small communities, rural communities, on the Alberta Mentorship Program. And then yesterday, I was honored to be in a couple of conversations following up that. And there's a real buzz around the prairies for things like mentoring. And so it makes us feel great. This morning, we're blessed to have Bao Ho. Bao, who's Mr. Everything at CRIEC, is going to walk us through the way that CRIEC does its matching. So both from a philosophical and then a practical nuts and bolts perspective. Bao's been with me for about 2.5 years, but has really sort of done amazing things and has taken us up to a whole other level. So without further ado, Bao, take it away, please.
Well, thanks, Bruce. Really appreciate all the flattering things you say. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and just share a little bit about what we do at CRIEC. I had an opportunity to speak a couple weeks ago. I think that we spoke briefly on the topic of mentor recruitment. So though I'm jumping in and out, I'm not generally aware of the whole series of what's happening in the series. As I understand it, Doug and Bruce have been part of it week to week. You may have heard some people from Doug's staff talk about some of the way they do things up in ERIEC. Just to highlight one of the things Cheryl spoke, it is different for each market. It is different from each community. And although our sister organization up in Edmonton, ERIEC, and us do share a lot of similarities, we do have different ways of doing things, and that's really dictated by the differences between the Calgary and the Edmonton markets. Bruce and Doug, if you've had the pleasure to hear them week in and week out, they're very aspirational speakers. They talk about the benefits of mentoring philosophically and such. A lot of what I do at CRIEC is really the nuts and bolts. So excuse me if I don't really hit that level of aspiration. The presentation I kind of built together is just a really bare bones procedure. This is how CRIEC tends to do it. All right, and without any further ado, oh, actually, Cheryl, looks like I might need to be a co-host. It does say that sharing has been disabled.
Okay, you should have that now.
Wonderful. So thank you again for your just interest in hearing how we set up our mentoring program and the process in which we go about matching partners. Now, actually, when Bruce asked me to put together a presentation about how we match, I was just thought, Bruce, it's really simple. I don't know how I could do a presentation on it. It is, we do profession-based matching. And I was actually I was struggling a little bit because that is the criteria in which we match mentee and mentor. I know occasionally we look into other factors such as, previously we used to look at availability, we used to look at maybe industry background as well, but the main basis of our matching has always been profession-based. But then I realized that ambiguity in how we match. How isn't necessarily just the criteria, how also involves the process in which we match. And I can talk about process endlessly. So without further ado, just a brief outline of what we do at CRIEC for our matching process. I always start from our program design. And again, this everyone's program design is going to be different. I know absolutely Edmonton does it different than the way we do it. So that's always the starting point in how we approach our matching process. And I'll get into that a little bit later, talking about how we do our mentoring, recruitment, and onboarding. The design influences that. Or for instance, if CRIEC does one-on-one mentor matching, we do a rolling intake as opposed to a cohort intake. So we're not doing group-based mentoring orientations very often. We're doing one-on-one mentoring orientations. We're doing one-on-one mentee assessments. So in our process, we look at those separately. We see what we do with our mentors one-on-one, and then we look at what we do with our mentees one-on-one. And I'll go into detail as we progress. Also, the very actual, well, I'll talk a little bit about the process in which we match them, how we approach a mentor with a mentoring inquiry, and a little bit about the processes we follow when we do that. Talking about our first meeting, the scheduling of a formal introduction and orientation between mentee and mentor. Talk about what our role is at CRIEC throughout the mentoring match, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we do after the mentoring match. So the first thing I started with is that starting from that program design, and I spoke to it a little bit already. At CRIEC, we don't do group-based mentoring. It's we do rolling intake. So far this year, we've done close to a little bit more than 200 mentoring matches or mentoring partnerships, and each one of those have been one-on-one. Whenever we're able to identify an available mentor and available mentee, we go when they're ready, as opposed to scheduling set dates. Now, there's some pros to that. Number one, there's flexibility, there's speed. We don't have to have mentees wait, and it absolutely is one-on-one. Some of the cons of that is if I've matched 70 people, that means I've done 70 mentoring orientations. That means I've done 70 assessments and 70 mentee assessments and orientations. So it's definitely not as efficient, and we don't do group orientations, which has their own interactive element, has that cohort-based learning element to it. So, depending on whatever program design you go with, there's different elements you do need to look at and how it impacts the matching process. So, as I said, it starts with our mentor recruitment piece. So I won't dive deep into that. In essence, when we approach a mentor or when a mentor approaches us, we share our work. We share the essence of what we do, our story, and the value we add to potentially both their experience and to our end client, the mentees. And usually that's what drives a mentor wanting to work with us. So we have eligibility. And we do meet with all of our mentors. That's something that our mentor recruitment engagement specialist will do. First of all, the normal process is they'll usually approach whether our mentor person reaches out to them or they come to CRIEC through our website or another. They'll usually send an email trying to just get an understanding of what the program is. So there's that initial Q&A stage, followed by if they do want to proceed, we have that application process where they check, and that's a direct link on our website, and they check if they match our eligibility criteria. And then our mentor recruitment and engagement specialist will actually meet them for a 10 to 15 minute conversation. They'll review what the program is, give them more context, as well as just ask them questions about the type of mentoring they want to be involved in. And at that point, the mentor will also provide, we have ongoing training as well as at that moment training. So that context I spoke to is that outline of what our mentoring program is, what's expected of a mentor, what the goal of our mentoring program is. They can get their hands on our mentoring handbook. It's a great resource. There's some great stuff about cross-cultural communication there, goal setting, as well as 16 weeks of topics that mentor and mentees can work on together. They're all geared towards newcomer professionals, and they're all designed to help develop a newcomer professional skill set and knowledge base. Part of our ongoing training is we also have senior mentor Q&A. So we ask our mentors or new mentors to be available, sign up for these events that we have kind of every month. We have mentors have been with us a long time and an advisory group, and we ask people from that advisory group to be present at those Q&As to answer any questions a new mentor might have. We're developing training videos. We have these events called mentor shares and mentor tools as well that are geared directly only to mentors, not the mentees or the clients, and it's to help upskill and develop their skills to be better mentors. On the other side, we have what we do with our mentees. Now we have we have our eligibility criteria. It's listed on our website, but we also have 2 assessment steps. So the first one is when a mentee wants to apply for the program, they'll send an email to our mentoring program admin, who will send out our application form, and they fill it out via SurveyMonkey. And in essence, what we ask on that SurveyMonkey, in addition to biographic data and questions that will help us assess our client, is whether they hit the hard eligibility criteria, you know, language, whether they have that professional background, what their education is, etc. If they meet all of our hard eligibility criteria, then they are passed to a mentoring partnership coordinator who will do a face-to-face, one-to-one assessment. And we know at that point they already have the language and the hard criteria. What we're really getting at in that second assessment is whether or not the mentee can commit and prioritize the mentoring partnership and have an understanding of what mentoring is. When I say what that understanding of mentoring is, it's oftentimes I have this conversation with our clients. Our mentees know that mentorship is valuable. They want to gain information. They want to gain an opportunity to network. They want to gain advice and support. And absolutely, our mentors are in a position to provide all of that. But it's not a transactional relationship. The very nature of mentoring is relational in its nature between mentor and mentee. And we make sure the mentee understands that when we're assessing them, that you're getting all of that, but it's in the context of a relation, not a transaction. Our mentors want to invest in our mentees. Our mentors want to support our mentees, see them do well in their life and their career. And then the rest of that face-to-face assessment is a one-on-one orientation. There we're talking about the structure and the details, the logistics, if you will, of the mentoring program itself. At CRIEC, it's a 16-week program. We talk about the goal of the program, which isn't that the mentor will find them employment. It's that the mentor will provide that support that we talked about, the information, the guidance, the wraparound support, that other perspective. Right now, everything is done virtually. So we have we talk about the ins and outs and the expectations that given COVID, all of our mentoring is done via virtual channels. It's one-on-one, and our partnership is flexible. It's a byword that we repeat repeatedly to our mentees and our mentors. It is flexible. Not one mentoring partnership is going to be the same as another mentoring partnership, because the individuals involved are unique personalities and their needs are going to be different. So we empower and we encourage our mentees and mentors to be flexible with each other, not just on the amount and the manner in which they meet and how often they meet, but on the topics of conversation as well. When I talked about our handbook, our mentees have a handbook as well, the same 16 weeks, but it's not a guide. That's not our program where they go week by week by week. It's a guide. It's a roadmap, if you will, where they'll give them ideas to talk about, but a mentee's needs may not fit that exact schedule. Maybe out of the conversation between mentee and mentor, they decide to spend more time on networking as opposed to interviewing, things like that. And I also, at that time, we set expectations for matching. Now, what I mean by that is because we don't have set dates by cohorts, we try and set a mentee up with a match as soon as we can find a mentor. And we don't have a storeroom in the back where we keep our mentors on the shelf. This is what I usually say to our mentees. The match can be quick. In fact, I met with someone last Friday, and they've already started their mentoring partnership. But sometimes it can take weeks or even months to find them a match or find them an available mentor. And part of our conversation is to let them know this and set those expectations. So all of this happens before we even match start the actual matching process. But they're all essential steps so that the mentor has an expectation of what's going to happen and the mentee has an understanding of what's going to happen. So next comes the mentoring inquiry. All of our mentors who have been met by mentor over the years and by our mentor recruitment and engagement specialist who have gone through the eligibility criteria and those assessments and have accordingly been approved to be available mentors just end up in our matching system, our matching database. And those mentees, our matching team, our mentoring partnership coordinators have met them personally. They understand their background, they understand their needs, they understand their profession, of course. And as I mentioned previously, CRIEC is a profession-based mentoring system. So then we'll start searching through our database at that point for mentors who match what the mentoring partnership coordinator has really come to know of the mentee. And based on that, we find available mentors, and it's a simple manual process. We just send an email inquiry attaching the mentee's resume for the mentor review. Now, our mentors are always able to say no, whether it's because they're not able to commit to a 16-week mentoring partnership at this time. Maybe there's something coming up in their professional lives or their personal lives. Maybe me, as a matcher, has done a very bad job of it, and somehow I've put an accountant's resume in front of a chemist. That's been known to happen. But the mentor really has the opportunity to review the resume they receive and say, I think it's a good fit or it's not a great fit. And they give us the go-ahead to say, yes, I want to commit to a mentoring partnership. At that time, so a couple things in that process. As the mentors communicate back and forth, maybe they have some questions about the mentee, we find it very important to put notes on the mentor's file. That way we know where our mentors are, how many, if they're in the process of engaging with a coordinator, they're not being approached by another coordinator or someone else from our matching team. We really want to try and keep our mentor database alive and active and healthy. So sometimes mentors just don't get back to us, and we have that opportunity to follow up with them. Maybe an email account has gone out of, is no longer active because they gave us an employer email and then they've moved on. Regardless, that happens from time to time in the database, but the notes and the way we follow up with our mentors and try and engage with them is essential for having a healthy source of mentors that you can rely on. So the noting is important, and the following up if you haven't heard back, and if after several attempts of reaching out to a mentor, sometimes you move them to an inactive status. Though we do have ongoing projects to re-engage with our mentors who we can't reach. Oftentimes it's just contact details that have gone awry, right? So that's the process for reaching out to them. When a mentor does say yes to matching, that's when we set up that first meeting, and it'll always be one-on-one, face-to-face. So that'll usually involve me, the mentee, and the mentor. I try and get the mentor's availability first 2 or 3 times because they're the ones who tend to be busy. Our mentees usually at this point in their employment journey tend to be unemployed or have more time in their schedules. So I usually get the mentor's availability. And then once they provide that, I coordinate with the mentee and set up a Teams meeting, a face-to-face meeting. And in that meeting, I start off with formal introductions. Although the mentor already has a copy of the mentee's resume, and 9 out of 10 mentees have already looked up the mentor on LinkedIn, it's still good to have them both introduce themselves, share their backgrounds and whatnot. And then after they've had an opportunity to share, I always say the same thing. I'm not going to speak too long in this meeting. First of all, we'll do formal introductions, then we'll review the expectations of the programs, talk about details, talk about what my role is during the partnership. Then I step out of that meeting and allow the mentee and the mentor to connect with one another at that point. Now, we also introduce the mentoring partnership agreement at that point. Now, obviously, this isn't a legal document, but it's more of an agreement in which how they're going to interact with one another. We ask them to commit to respecting one another, adhering to privacy, our code of conduct, etc., and in essence, professional behavior. Asking the mentors and mentees to review that in that first meeting with one another really sets the groundwork for a fruitful and impactful partnership. And usually before I step off the call, I'll also ask them, perhaps now is a good time to just set a regular time that you guys are going to meet, while of course emphasizing that freedom and flexibility is absolutely something we value in a mentoring partnership. And at that point, the mentee and the mentor really drive the bus themselves. I advise them in that meeting, and actually even during their orientations of my roles. My role is to check in with them formally at the 1 month and the 3 month mark, but I'll also be available throughout. Should there be any challenges, should there be any concerns, even to connect them to additional resources if that's something they want to be interested in. And it's important to keep on top of or involved in those partnerships, at least from a letting the mentee, the participants know that you're available. Sometimes partnerships don't click. Sometimes unexpected priorities come up in either one of their lives, and it's important to have that communication or let them know that that communication is always open. At times I've had to step in and just suggest strategies that they can use. Maybe rather than formal 1 hour meetings, keep them to one topic, 20 minutes, and be engaged other ways, maybe via email or LinkedIn. Just other ways that that are both flexible and that can continue a productive relationship. And the final piece is the post-mentoring. At 16 weeks, I always let them know that I will formally close the partnership at 16 weeks. Now, this is regardless of how often they've met. And with the flexibility element I spoke to, sometimes our partners meet bi-weekly instead of weekly. So it's eight meetings over that 16 weeks. That's okay as well. Sometimes we do call our program an 8 to 16 week program. Sometimes they've met 10 times, sometimes they've met 12 times. I also let them know that they are more than able to continue informally meeting and continuing that connection, because we've seen it go the other way, that they meet for 20 weeks or 30 weeks. 5 years later, they're still connected, because at a certain point, you just become friends and colleagues with your mentor. I always tell my clients right at that first meeting, you know, it's a great life practice. Surround yourself with mentors, whether they're part of a formal program or not. Just surround people who want to invest in you, give you guidance, give you that support. And from our perspective, it's very key to follow up with a mentor at the conclusion of a partnership. Number one, just thank them for their time. As volunteers, as people who've taken that, gone that extra mile and supported the mentees, that's something we really want to celebrate and appreciate. And then we just let them know, ask them, give them the opportunity to share with us if they've had a positive, negative experience, any tips for improving our program, and just ask them if they'd be open to mentoring again. It's part of the reason how we've developed a very healthy database. We have we have mentors who come in and they've mentored dozens of mentees by this time. We have one person who started with us day one, more than 20 mentees that he as an individual had mentored with CRIEC. And the post-mentorship piece with the mentee is also important. Number one, we want to hear about their experiences, give them that opportunity for feedback. If they need additional resources, we can refer them to them at that point. And from an important outcomes measurement standpoint, our program requires that we check in at the 3 month mark and the 6 month mark and see where they are. So I just remind them at that point, someone from our team will be contacting them at the 3 month mark and the 6 month mark. And then I also let them know that if they enjoyed their experience and if they're wanting to become mentors themselves, to keep us in mind and come back to us in a few years after they've attached to the workforce and had that success and developed that knowledge base for themselves. We consider it a mark of success that so many alumni come back to us after a few years. A significant amount of our mentors are former mentees. And so that's it for our matching process at CRIEC. Does anyone have any questions at this point? I guess I can stop the share.
Awesome, that was great, Bao. Would there be a difference if a mentee was in a licensed profession, like law, for example? Would we do something different for internationally trained lawyers, as an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to coming to CRIEC, I worked with another organization and part of a mentoring program here in the Calgary settlement sector, and they didn't work with anyone who did registered professions or licensed professions. That meant that program, we didn't work with lawyers, we didn't work with doctors, we didn't work with um, teachers, nurses, someone who needed to be licensed in order to just work in their field. There is professional engineers, but you don't actually need to be a PhD to work as an engineer. You can absolutely be an EIT or work as a technologist. But those licensed fields are absolutely unique. And the program I worked in previously, they didn't take those on because of the added and extra complications working with a licensed professional like that. Bruce happens to have been a lawyer in his past life or his past career. He brings that expertise in, and CRIEC really built that specialty since day one, really, because of Bruce's intimate knowledge of the process of registering as a lawyer. Now, one of the key differences for a lawyer, for instance, is it's a significantly, there's a lot more time involved before a newcomer professional who is an internationally trained lawyer can work as a lawyer. We found it to be about 18 months, so that's not even within the confines of a normal fiscal year for our reporting purposes. So we've approached it in a different way. A lot of the time, the staff is directly providing a lot of that direction and that support at the initial standpoint. And that means we've developed a number of workshops and webinars, a lot of one-on-one work with our staff member who's a specialist in working with internationally trained lawyers about educating them about what the process involves. Not to bore you with legalese, but there's NCA exams, and that usually takes several months to line up, and then they're studying for those exams. After a foreign trained or internationally trained lawyer passes those exams, there's an articling position they have to do, followed by ultimately being called to the bar. So that process can be a lengthy and long time. We have mentors who operate in that space, of course, but we found that the mentors are really effective in that post-articling space where where our mentees looking for connections. The mentor really isn't there to be a study buddy or to help them pass exams, etc. They can be involved at the very beginning and help giving that direction, but so can we as a staff team through our webinars and through that one-on-one work. And then the mentors come in usually at the end to help them understand what it's like finding a job in the legal profession here in Alberta.
And so we would do similar things with doctors. So if any of your clients are in the licensure process, and as Bao laid out, more particularly law, medicine, but there's like dozens of these regulated professions. What we found very useful to sort of learn about what it was, not duplicate. And so, for example, if we're working with an international trained doctor, an international medical grad, we connected with AIMGA, which is the Alberta International Medical Grads Association, got a great collaboration with them for the last 5 or 6 years, and we will connect with them. And so we're sort of acting as a facilitator. Jimmy or Susan might stay with us, knowing that they're passing these exams, and we're there for kind of mentoring support if need be somewhere down the road. But as Bao says, we sort of try to work those a little bit differently, but we don't just sort of hand off and say, well, this is not, we're not capable of doing this. But having said that, there are many, many, many regulated professions that we're just not capable of working with: nurses, radiologists, folks that are much better served by others. What we have done is figured out who in the community provides great services for those folks. And as it turns out, some of those organizations might circle back to us to say, can you provide some mentoring for them? And so that's our lane. We're really good at mentoring and that sort of stuff. So yeah. So we do try to run them. Sorry, as Bao says, it does get difficult. We're lucky with the lawyers because we have enough internationally trained lawyers, probably 30, 35 a year, that one person in the office is sort of developing an expertise on that for, part of her time. And so that's actually quite helpful. So awesome presentation, Bao. 35 minutes, and you didn't think this was going to be more than 35 seconds. Occupation specific, done. Move on.
That ambiguity how we match really threw me off. Well,
Yeah.
we match by profession, Bruce. What else do you want me to say?
But what we don't do is we don't use the algorithms.
Yeah.
And so none of us, I would like to say none of us are smart enough to understand the algorithms, but we do have some folks like Bao who've got a good sciencey background. But what we've learned long ago is that for us, the algorithms just didn't work. And so we don't use the mentoring machine to help the match. It's just sort of keep straight who's a mentee, who's a mentor, who's available, when did they come in. So more just tracking the information, and it's Bao's team that does the old fashioned matching people.
Mm-hmm. The more we get to know who our mentors are, and that's actually part of the reason why we set up that mentor Q&A session that I talked about with it, that involved our senior mentor from our advisory group. It gives the mentors an opportunity to share beyond what's in their resume or beyond what they enter into our database system. We get to hear, our team is on the call. We don't say a lot. We're just saying we're here to get to know our mentors. But the matching team just gets to hear about their passion, what they're interested in directly. And that really facilitates our mentoring process. Sometimes I'm really frustrated actually with what sometimes just appears on the screen. There are some people who come through the system that I perhaps may never match as a mentor because their background, they didn't share enough in their application form. They'll just say their title, for instance, is a consultant, and they don't really go into who they are. And that isn't enough for me to match on. But being able to sit with them and hear them in that mentor Q&A, really, I get an understanding of more of their skill set, obviously, but also who they are and what their passions are. We can update those notes, and then that gives us a further base for matching those people.
So I just want to bring, there's a question from Ambreen in the chat about, does the organization accept referrals or walk-in? And maybe Ambreen, you could just clarify you're meaning that for mentors or for mentees, or did you want to speak a little bit to your question?
Yeah, so I moved to Canada like more than 10 years ago. So my husband had a little bit experience working with ERIEC a long time ago. So I don't remember that time that someone referred us to go there, or it was just a walk-in. Because other organization, they just send referrals. If some newcomers or somebody needs some one-on-one mentorship or some other help, I just want to know, is it walk-in or it is just a referral?
We do accept walk-ins. We do. I would say the most of our mentees come to us via referral, probably from someone else in the Calgary settlement sector. But a significant amount also just do their research, and they punch in mentoring or employment, Calgary Immigrant, and we're one of the first searches, and they approach us, and we'll absolutely work with them as well.
Now, they might have connected with us, Ambreen, before they left home country. So whether formally through a pre-arrival system, and there's about 2 or 3 that we connect with and we do some mentoring for, but they might have, as Bao says, it might have just done some research from back home and connect with us, and they land and they're with us. Bao, I would probably say, let's say maybe 70% are from referrals, and we like that because one, it demonstrates where we sit in the larger ecosystem of newcomer services in a city, but also because if they come from a really good immigrant serving agency like CWA or CCIS, for example, we know that they've had some basics, right? They're probably settled now. They're living in the right place. Their kids are registered in school. They found their house of faith, and they might have even had some resume writing courses or a little bit of an understanding. So when they come to us, part of what Bao's team is trying to assess is are Jimmy and Susan ready for this mentoring commitment right now, or is it still a bit too premature? They haven't yet sort of sorted some things out. And Bao, sometimes that's a tough conversation though, right? If you're telling Jimmy, I think you need a few more things before we can get you into a mentoring partnership.
Sometimes, I guess it's how you approach it. A lot of the mentors, if it's, you need just a little bit more time to come back to us, yes. If it is we don't feel you're a match. That's a little more of a challenging conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a question about. You mentioned that you, Sandra, rather me for mentors, mentees rather me for mentors before putting them together and introduce them together. So do you mean by this you have to wait until you get the mentors approval before matching mentees and mentors? So mentors.
Yes, absolutely. So the mentors always have that ability to say no, just for a number of reasons. A lot of our mentors are what we call those passive mentors. They've been in our system for years. They know they're a CRIEC mentor. They may be reached out to occasionally. The timing may not always line up. Maybe we reach out to them just before they're about to go on a big vacation, or a crazy season of work's about to start. So we always give our mentors the freedom to decline mentoring at this time. That doesn't mean they're no longer a CRIEC mentor. They're just actually, our system really allows us to put them on temporary unavailability. For instance, if they communicate, oh, sorry, I'm not available till the spring, that's not a problem. We just say temporarily unavailable. They'll revert to automatic available at the springtime, in which they're free to be approached again. Or as I said, and I'm a little embarrassed to say it, it's probably happened more than once or twice that I've just done a bad match. I remember I put quality assurance is a strange thing, because quality assurance exists in IT, in accounting, and in general just business, and I've sometimes done a bad match. Oh, someone does QA, so I put the wrong candidate. And the mentors told me, I don't think this is a good match, Val. So yes, we have to let the mentor say yes. And then once they say yes, I respond, wonderful, thank you. Let's set up a meeting, and then I go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
So Bao, as a follow-up, what would be, what have been some of the things mentors have told you to say no, other than work scheduling or I've got a vacation coming up?
Generally, those are it, or just that maybe they haven't heard from us for a while, and they're just not feeling ready to be a mentor at this time. You know, because of the nature of our system, it can be months, years between the times we approach our mentors. But that's something we've approached from another way. How do we continually engage with our mentors so that they're still involved in the CRIEC mentoring community? But yeah, just that's paramount. Always allowing our mentors that freedom to say yes or no. But fortunately, we're in a position where over the years we've amassed hundreds of mentors in our system, and new mentors are signing up all the time. So through that process, we always thank you so much for your feedback. I'll move on to someone else. Most of the times it is, I just can't at this time. I'm busy. Maybe I started a course. Rarely it's because I made the mistake, but yeah. But in general, regardless what their reason is, we accept it and then we move on.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things that we did last year in particular was we had this large database of, I don't know, about maybe 750 mentors, and we knew maybe only half of them were really active, right? This was sort of a historical database that we've been gathering. And so we began a bit of a cleanup, but part of that was we wanted to continually re-engage. So we brought somebody on board specifically to do mentor engagement and recruitment. And so it's from the full recruitment, bringing them in, and then setting up these ongoing, what Bao calls these upskilling sessions. So mentor shares, where we'll share lunch, and a CRIEC mentor can facilitate a conversation. A mentor tool, where we do the same thing, but we have an outside expert who might come in and share some learning. And there's always networking happening. Then we might do a workshop. Bao and I might meet with a bunch of mentors to do a very specific mentoring skill, like active listening or how to have a tough conversation. Sometimes an employer, we're working with a couple employers now who bring us over specifically to work with their employees who are mentors. And so, you know, a variety of different things. But what I was talking about the other day is something that I just love. So new mentors who have come in, say on a monthly basis, they meet for about an hour and a half after the orientation, after they've been registered, after they, you know, have signed up to be a mentor. But they meet with a senior mentor in a really facilitated Q&A. And as Bao says, we were just like flies on the wall listening, and it's amazing what you hear. A mentor says, you know, I can mentor anybody. just somebody who needs a little bit of help here and there. And that helps us so much about being able to say, so now I'm thinking Susan could be an awesome mentor for somebody outside of her narrow profession. Particularly if a mentee is thinking about transferring their considerable skills into that profession. And so that, and it also engages the mentors. So the mentors walk out of this saying, wow, whoa, this group really showed me the love, like this group. And then they talk to a friend who talks to two friends, and so on and so on. And
all of these strategies, we're trying to do win-wins and find things that help keep our mentors engaged, but also make them feel part of the community, also recruit new mentors. We're always trying to find additional value adds for every activity we're doing. So,
can I just plumb a little bit? I think, Bao, you raised a really great distinction, because we've actually received that request, from other stakeholders. Isn't there an app, right, that can match a mentor?
Mm-hmm.
And to say, like, the algorithm, this sort of known conditions to set up and pop out, boop, a great match at the end. What would you say in that more subjective world, are the top 3 characteristics of a good match? And sometimes it's easier to start with the negative. Like, so what is the top 3 things about a match that really isn't a good one, so that we can know sort of what the good match is? And I sort of open that up because I know there's, not just for you to respond, but there's some good wisdom in the space right now.
Absolutely. Actually, this is something, I rehearse this because, as I said, I say it 70 times whenever I do. I tell the story about one of our particular mentors, and this is with my assessments and orientations with my mentee. I tell them how every mentor is different from another, especially when I talk about the context of experience of being a mentor. This mentor has been with us 6 years. He's mentored 11 people, and I have to be incredibly careful who I match him with. He won't even let me match him with anyone unless he's met them personally, and he's assessed that they're committed and they'll prioritize and that they're hardworking. I always say this mentor is incredibly demanding of his mentees. They write mutual accountability goals that he's devised for himself, and he expects utmost professionalism. He does not like excuses in terms of mentees who miss meetings or are later with meetings, and he assigns homework assignments, and it needs them to be ultimately utmost prepared before he meets them. But the 11 mentees he's worked with have absolutely loved him. The 11 mentees he's worked with, he's gone above and beyond. They're all working in their fields. He cares so much for them. But that may not be a fit with every mentee. But I also talk about new mentors who come in and they have a lot of passion, they have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have that structure. So sometimes I say that mentor might be engaging with you more often and just determining the direction and what that partnership looks like through conversations with you. They'll tell you, I'll give you everything I have, but you need to tell me what your needs are, and then I'll go full bore with those needs. So an example of that is, I wouldn't say it's a bad match, a bad mentor or a bad mentee, but sometimes it's just not a match. If I get a sense during that conversation with the mentee that this person has a lot going on right now, they have a transition job, they might have enrolled in a course, they have a lot of professional development, they have a family that's keeping them active, they may not be the right match for that first mentor I spoke about. Things like that. And that comes from an awareness of knowing who our mentees and who our mentors are.
No, that's great, because I think, one of the challenges off the bat is to really, what am I listening for, when I'm screening, when I'm talking to a mentor or a mentee about, what the fit is. And so I'm hearing, to pull out a couple pieces, the sort of structure. I mean, industry obviously is one sorting bucket, but how much structure, how much support there can be, knowing that often mentees are coming with multiple competing responsibilities, and they don't always have full control over, how they organize their priorities. So I think your story really illustrates, you know, so for some mentors, they need certain structures for it to work really well, and it can be brilliant, right? Like that both can get a tremendous amount out of the experience. So, you know, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of shake down,
Yeah.
you know, some of those details, right? Because I mean, people have often said, "Oh, this is like dating," and it's like, well, sort of. You know, the commitment isn't maybe lifelong, but it can be a long-term sort of benefit. So, how to know, you know, how people are a fit.
Another thing that often comes up, I think, is mentees who are in that space of looking at their transition or transition skills, or looking at alternate career pathing for one reason or another. It might be that they just want to change of direction upon arriving in Canada. Maybe they've run into barriers and they want to consider other options. Maybe the external, like I have this conversation often with petroleum engineers these days. Maybe there's just no work in their field, and they need to look at other options. So that's something. If they're in that space, I'll usually go towards a very senior mentor who's had a lot of different career experience, and they can give, not to direct or tell the mentee what to do, but just give them that guidance and that perspective that yes, you can move in a different direction perhaps, and you can still have a rewarding and fulfilling career. Your career in Canada is a blank canvas as opposed to what it necessarily was in your prior context. If a mentee comes with a skill set that's in demand and they know this is what they want and they want to go for, I don't necessarily need that well-rounded mentor. Maybe I'll just find a really committed mentor in their field, things like that.
Exactly. And Cheryl, one thing that Bao and I have noticed and the rest of the team is that mentors evolve. So mentors who have been with us for 5 or 6 years, their own needs and their own desires from the mentoring program sometimes shift. So what we've discovered is that we've had a number of more senior mentors, maybe a handful, who love the 1 cup of coffee mentoring. So it fits in well to our connector program. So what Bao and the team would be looking for is Jimmy or Susan has 2 or 3 questions that they need answered before they can be matched in a mentoring partnership. So the team is very proactive. They'll figure out who might be a great 1 cup of coffee. And we've got a couple of those mentors who they love that space. They love coming in, having 1 or 2 cups of coffee. Oftentimes we're with them in that 1 or 2, in that 1 cup of coffee conversation so that we're hearing, but oftentimes not. And then we'll circle back with the mentee and then maybe they can be matched thereafter. So we try to do, and as Bao says, it's a win-win. So we're catering to the mentor who has evolved to that part of their mentoring life, but as well, that we have a real need because the mentee has a real need, so we can get that good match that way. So that's how sometimes we connect our connector program into the mentoring program.
Actually, part of the reason why we developed those mentors Q&As as well is that senior group of mentors. Frankly, they told me they were sick. I'm an accountant, but I can mentor more than accountants. Can we do non-profession-based mentoring? So they wanted to do an element of pure mentoring. Our mentees, they want that profession-based mentoring. So I couldn't always just say, we're going to throw the profession-based mentoring out the window. Some of our mentees are open to that they'll consider talking to anyone, in which case just a really good senior experienced mentor would be great. But generally speaking, most of our mentees want someone in their profession. The senior mentors who want that variety, they've really done a lot of pure mentoring, mentoring other mentors. And that's something we've just, as we become aware of that capacity and appetite amongst our senior mentor base, and then that we've started offering.
And I'm really liking, what I'm hearing, like it's a very strength-based kind of method, lining up what not just the mentee is looking for and needs, but to really, connect people based on the strengths of what they can provide each other. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. And if you're just starting off a mentoring program, nothing wrong with having, developing a small cadre of mentors, a dozen, and show them the love, show them all the things that can happen. Don't worry about having 50, focus on maybe having 10 to a dozen. And that's how Doug started 12 years ago. That's how we started. We had 34 mentors. at one point in time, and I think we had maybe 50 by the end of my second year, and they had each done 2 or 3 mentoring partnerships because we really cultivated that very small group, and then from there it grew. And so we went for the depth rather than for the breadth, and now we're quite fortunate, like Eric, we've got both, you know, a wide range, and they've been with us for a long time. One interesting thing that we, Bao and I have found, and it may be just because, like Doug, we're, you know, a dozen years old or so, but we have a number of retired people who are coming to us who want a mentor. And, you know, my favorite mentor in the system is almost 80 now, and he's been with me since day one. He suffers from Parkinson's. I can say that because he's publicly announced it. And so now he thinks he can only mentor a few, as opposed to mentoring 4 or 5 a year. But what he's done is he's reached out through his church groups, through his bridge groups, and through Rotary groups. And occasionally we'll get people who are retired wanting to mentor with us. And as Bao says, if we can figure out if it's a win-win, then by all means. So there's all different aspects. And then what we're finding too, the other side of the scale, I think the latest profile that came in showed that the vast majority of our mentees are under 35. That is completely different, Dougie, from where we were a decade ago. They were in that 35 to 50 category. Now they're in the 30 to 35 category. So does that shift the way we recruit mentors and the way that we do matching? So interest for the team, Bao says, very one-on-one.
I think Bruce might have froze a little bit there.
Engineer from Peru, a factor for Bao's team to be considering. You know, is age an important thing? What we're finding is not really, but what it does do is it allows us to maybe consider younger mentors as well. So then you cultivate a base of under 35-year-old mentors who otherwise fit all the criteria. They've got the experience, they love mentoring and that sort of stuff. So.
I'm sorry, I do have to step out for an 11 o'clock meeting. Was very glad to be here. Are there any other questions at this point?
Awesome, thank you, Bao.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's great to hear the different voices of who's being involved with it, and as always, you know, we're trying to, you know, support anyone who's involved as you're taking this on in Fort McMurray and elsewhere, but also to spark innovation on how it's possible and how to meet the needs of your community. So thanks very much, much appreciated. And
great.
I'll just mention, and Bal, feel free to take care of yourself and step off. Yeah. You need to. I'll just put into the chat, we've got 2 upcoming sessions just in case you're interested and haven't registered. So looking at evaluating success in a couple of weeks. And then we have Stephanie Gillis-Paulgard coming to support us around promoting your program and really looking in at social media. And so for anybody who has registered for that session, I just popped out an email to say, you know, she'd really love to hear, you know, top 3 challenges or 3 things you're really interested in, just because there's so much that she could talk about and to focus that in. But I'll just, you know, if people have ideas about that too, that they'd like to see, you know, feel free to shoot me a line or just let us know so we can really target it in. But again, thanks so much for coming, and thanks Bruce for taking on this one and bringing Bao in. That, you know, it's really good information.
Great, thank you all.
All right.
Great. Cheers.
Take care, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.